Teri Reuter. Welcome to the lockdown sessions. How are you?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank you. Actually, that's an interesting question. I am doing the best I can. So I'm good. How are you today?
Well, as we're recording this, you are experiencing day 2 of your election. So it kind of places this podcast in time. So I'm sure How Are You has a whole plethora of avenues and rabbit holes we could go down. So we won't. We'll assume fine. We'll work off the back of that. And welcome, because these podcasts are all about me having conversations with people I work with, and whether that's been some clients or great coaches. You operate as a leadership and communication coach. We're planning to do some work together in the new year with a US client. And I thought it would be cool from your perspective to get a deeper understanding of some of the lockdown themes that have shown up for you. Mm-hmm. And so my starter for 10 is the same question to everyone. What's been your observations over the last sort of 7-8 months? We'll keep away from politics, but when it comes to behavior and those kinds of themes that you've seen going on during lockdown?
Well, that's interesting. I think that what I have seen mostly is that people are becoming more concentrated versions of themselves. So the things that were occupying them, their thoughts, questions that they have about themselves, maybe it's because their schedules have changed and they've had more time to think. Even though people are actually working more hours, they've made space for them to think. So I've noticed that people are asking themselves, is this what I want to be doing? Are these the people that I want to be doing it with? Are there new things that I'd like to try? So that's been interesting for me. It's been a lot of fun to get to work with my clients about some of these maybe existential questions.
And I kind of know why now, right? Because we've just got all this time and the world looks so different. But you're helping people then move through kind of like a transitional phase. Self-awareness is great, but it's only the starting point. So how have people moved from understanding themselves more into kind of taking decisive action? What are the steps and changes people are making when they start to answer these questions?
As you ask me the question, it makes me think that I'm not sure that people I do have a few clients who've made some big changes. They've changed jobs during this time, or they plan to change their job or role. What I've noticed is that what we work on often is helping them understand why they're going through the motions that they are, how they can do it and be more effective and be happier at the same time. So the lockdown has really changed the way people do business. Most of the people that I work with, they're always flying from here to there. And now everybody's working from home. And I wouldn't say people are missing the flying around and being away. They are looking for ways to do what they're doing and be happier at it.
Yeah, I hear that. I definitely haven't missed jumping on planes all the time. I miss the physical contact with people, of course, but I think there's something in that, and it triggers for me a comment that was actually, it was said to me this morning by one of my coachees who's a VP out in Italy, and he said to me, the biggest problem right now, he said, for me and my team is we're all sleeping at work.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting way to put it.
Yeah, right. What an interesting framing of the fatigue that people are feeling, because work is now at home and that's where they sleep. In fact, he turned his camera around and showed me he actually had a bed at the other end. I mean, it's the guest room he's working in his house, but still there's a bed there and he's sleeping at work. And this is how he was looking at it. And so when you're talking to people, what are some of the challenges, those blurred lines, what do you see as these themes that come up? Because the lines are blurred now between work and home. I don't know how you even get clarity when it's so blurry.
Oh, I don't know. For me, what I usually do with people is help them understand how the language they use, the words they use, are not just sending messages to someone else, but as we send a message to someone else, we're taking that in. And so we can either confirm the thoughts that we already have. And so we become more and more who we are in one way, or we can see about changing the message that we're sending, which also changes our understanding of ourselves. So, for example, when you have somebody who feels like they're sleeping at work, my clients most of them have talked about working more hours, and we'll have conversations about who's deciding that for them, right? They feel like they're trapped. So then they get into that cycle of people are pinging them at any time. People know you're at home, so they know that you're not on a plane somewhere and can't be reached. And so what do you do about that? You can buy into it, and then you create that cycle, and you're telling somebody else, I'm at work all the time. Or you can change the message that you want to send, which also changes the message in your head. So how do we talk about that? How do you have the conversation to tell people that this is the time that you're going to be available, rather than having to say, I'm not going to be available for you?
So actually being more explicit with our communication actually really helps frame the relationship we have with ourselves as well as with others.
Yeah. Yes. It's not just being explicit, it's being explicit in a particular way. So I like to talk to people about what I call what is language. If we talk about what we want, then you and I can both understand it. If I'm just telling you what I don't want, we don't know what I do want. So I love to reach for what is rather than what I want to avoid. What do I want to grab onto rather than what do I want to let go? And if you fill your life with enough things that you want, it's so much easier to resist the urge to pull in something you don't want.
I love that, because part of the problem, I think, in so many relationships, not just at work, but actually intimate relationships too, is that we talk about what we don't have, what we don't need, what we don't want to see. We don't often talk. And maybe there's a cultural thing here in not feeling comfortable in saying, this is what I want.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow we're taught at some point not to speak like that. I want, doesn't get was a mantra I was taught when I was younger, when I used to say what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I can still hear, my folks brought me up great, brilliant parents, but I can hear them saying it. Brad, I want, doesn't get.
Right.
But actually, maybe it does.
Well, for example, with my children, if they said to me when they were growing up, I want this, I would say, can you try that again? And they'd say, well, I'd prefer, or I'd like.
They must communicate so beautifully now they're older.
Actually, they do. Both of them they're excellent communicators. And now, one of the beautiful parts of the pandemic, something that I really grab onto, is they're both much more present with me. So for a couple of months, they're both actually at home since they can work remotely now. So that's nice. So, when you talk about what I want, I think what you said is correct. If we really look at it like, this is what I want, society has put it up like, if I get this, then you can't have that. And I like to think of it as we can create that shared understanding between the two of us. So if you and I are having good communication, I can discover what it is that I prefer. And if I listen to you well, I can discover what you prefer. And then the two of us can negotiate a shared understanding of that. And so it's that very active communication to be able to really recognize what are my preferences, because we go around automatically doing things without really examining it, and that can get us into trouble. So if you take some time to examine, you'll have a better pathway, clearer pathway.
I'm a huge fan of auditing language. As someone who grew up sort of training as a psychologist, I've always found auditing language really a powerful way of checking myself and also others. You can hear the words people repeat and use, and it gives so much away. I guess for what I love about what you're saying is it harnesses a real authenticity in how people communicate, right? It's that be authentic with your word. And it's like, really be authentic with your word, finding that way to express. I know there's a US group, Vital Smarts, who talk about crucial conversations. And it's all about adding into this pool of shared meaning. And when you were describing it then, I'm thinking to myself, oh, it reminds me of this concept of how do I find a way of, rather than making it, this is what I want and this is what I don't want, actually being able to know what I want to say to you and give you the space to help me understand what you want. And that way lies balance.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's really collaboration. The framework that I use, that I've developed over the years, I call it the real lead. The first part is about how do I make real relationships that allow me to show up as who I am. So the R stands for reciprocity. We have two-way street, a real two-way street for both of us. Then we show up as equal human beings, regardless of where we are in a hierarchy. If one has more money or more power, that we can respect each other as human beings so that we can show up as we authentically are. And as you make those real connections with people through being able to express what is rather than what isn't, and being able to listen for someone's patterns so that I can get that extra meaning in order to influence somebody. So that's the lead part. How do I create this cycle of eliciting from you engagement and adjusting to the moment so that I can direct the outcomes that we're going to have? So inspire my team, help improve performance, help them find themselves. And so when you get that going, like you said, balance, it feels to me like this virtuous cycle that we can use the relationships we have with people to influence each other.
I really buy into your idea of starting with the reciprocity. And I always find that difficult to say that word, actually, but it's a lovely word because...
Well, why is that?
I don't know. It's just a word I struggle with mentally in my head before I say it. Reciprocity. That ability to see everyone as an ally, and that drives that equality. Right. And that encourages authenticity, that instills in me the desire to want to listen. And if I've got that kind of ability to go through those phases, it seems to me actually you then create a really open, honest, transparent communication. And as I'm saying that out loud, the thing that jumps into my head is the amount of leaders right now who are going to be having conversations with their teams and their people about psychological safety, coming back into offices in the US, opening up the States. Here in the UK, we're going back into lockdown today. So how do we come back into offices? And actually using that real acronym that you've positioned there could be a fantastic way of getting people to share actually what they need to feel safe.
Right.
To come back. I could really see that as quite powerful.
Oh, I think psychological safety is so important. That's something that has changed. One of the things that I do is deliver in-person learnings. We might be somewhere for a couple of days together. Well, that all went virtual. And in the classroom, I think one of the things that I really bring, especially because I have a background in therapy, is a sense of psychological safety. When I had to learn to do that on a Zoom call for a group of people, I was surprised at how much harder it was. And when I first started doing the virtual trainings, I found that we would finish a 2-hour virtual session and I hadn't created that sense of safety. And so I had to learn to do it faster, because before I had hours to do it and now I had to do it in a shortened timeline. And so just a few ways of drawing people in, trying to look at the pictures, not really speaking from slides. Slides are not my favorite way because you can't see each other. I like to just have people's faces on the screen, that you really can make that human connection even through this technological connection so that you create that psychological safety. And took me a little while, maybe a couple of months to get that down. It showed me that that is such a foundation, and you can only have that sense of safety when you feel valued by the person that you're with, right? You valued and respected, even when one person may have more expertise or there's some deference for a sense of respect, so that you can show up as who you are, because you're best when you are really who you are.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you that, in fact, one of the things I found really helped with that in the virtual world, because we're digitally hyper connected, what I've really liked about lockdown has been pets and kids are now part of our meetings. And that opportunity where, a year ago, you wouldn't have people sitting in a meeting with their 3-year-old on their lap. But now we can. And the other day, my Springer, one of the dogs, sort of nudged the door open of the office in the back of the garden and came in and kind of stood up on my leg and just stood staring at the screen for 20 minutes, yawning away. And actually, we invite each other into our homes. We see our backgrounds. We see people walking around. Actually, there's a deeper level of intimacy now, even though we're only connected digitally, than there ever was when we were suited and booted in the office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the town centre that we were in.
Right.
So I kind of almost feel like there's a challenge to us to be able to get there quicker, because the environment actually is suited to us getting there quicker. I'm in your home right now.
I know, right? So how do you think, like when we think about going back to whatever it's going to be, how do you think we can capture the best of both?
That's a great question. About 2 months ago, I ran a workshop, my only workshop since March, inside an office. They were a pharma company. It was an executive group. We were doing a long-term planning strategic 3 days. And because they were pharma, it was a very sterile working environment. Everyone had gloves on. We had to wear masks for discussions. If you were presenting your 2-year plan, you took your mask off at the front. But otherwise, any group discussions, it was masks and gloves. Lunch was served in boxes with your name on it, so you only had to touch it. I mean, it was militant. You all had bins to put your gloves in. I mean, it was sterile pharma company. And I remember at the end of day one having a chat with the chairman and chairperson and saying to him, listen, are you sure you want to come back tomorrow? Because the ability to create intimacy with masks on is almost zero. I mean, literally, it's almost zero. We could have more intimacy if we were in a Zoom room. And his view was actually he wanted this group of, C-level guys to be together for the first time in months to really talk about stuff. So we went with it. And I don't know if I've got the answer yet to what it's going to possibly look like, because I sense that we're going to need the psychological safety bit is going to come up again, because at what point are we going to be able to get into a huddle and have a chat? Are we going to be able to just go into another breakout room, sit down? We're going to have to move our chairs around with us because we don't want to touch other surfaces. There's so much, unknown. You're going to get people to write on the whiteboard because you've been using the pen. And so I don't know. What I do know is that the speed at which everyone has become used to online facilitation, for a number of my clients there are a lot of global based programs, so they're flying people into locations. I don't know if they'll come back, except for, kickoffs and graduations where you get the chance to connect, to celebrate. The learning itself, I think, from these companies is, apart from the cost saving.
Well, I think that one of the biggest reasons that we keep doing the same kinds of trainings over and over and over again is that we have this intense period of time where people are focusing on it, and then we go back to our everyday lives. If we really want to do something, we have to have multiple touch points. And so to me, one of the beauties of this experience is that we can see how well we can connect virtually. So I'm imagining that you might have 4 or 5 touch points before you meet in person on short periods of time, an hour or 2 hours. And then you get somebody over a couple of months rather than over 3 days. And then you can still have your day or your 2 days together.
Right.
And then touch points afterwards. So it feels to me like a hybrid of the experiences is really going to enhance the ability of people to grow and develop, to test things out and then come back and talk about them.
I could see that, because actually when you then come together, you have already created a deeper level of intimacy, rather than having to kind of spend those sort of 16 hours where you are together in a workshop trying to build the intimacy. Actually, you've had 1 hour here, 2 hours there, little group facilitation outside of this, and then you come together for that 1 day or 2 days where you're actually together and the relationships are already built.
Mm-hmm. You've got me thinking about all kinds of things now, because you don't necessarily have to touch the content points. Once you get together, you'll have some background, and then you can do more of whatever it is that you're learning. You can do more of it when you're together.
Yeah, because actually 2 hours, what I've realized as well is you don't need 8 hours to do a workshop. You can actually do it in 4 and still create a level of intimacy and connection with people. Like you, I'm not a fan of the PowerPoint. I would much rather have 16 boxes on the screen where we're all waving and talking, and let's drop into a breakout room and have a shorter discussion and then come back and jam about it. Mm-hmm. No doubt the world will look quite different, and maybe the opportunity we have is to lead like a futurist, because a year ago, if you and I were having this conversation, we couldn't have possibly imagined where we are today.
Right.
And most of us, I don't think, can imagine what it will be like in a year. But maybe because we are responsible for driving people's growth and enabling that growth, maybe if we think as futurists and we become kind of evangelicals about, from the inside out, what the possibilities could be. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, who knows? That could be just, lovely.
There's so many cool things that could come forward. Like, I don't know, you have one of those Oculus things, the virtual reality. So we got one of those goggles, and I can just totally see this idea that we can, you'll meet in a virtual space for some. It just gives you another, people approach change in so many different ways. Some people like to touch things. Some people want to hear it. Some people want to feel it, right? So you can have so many different avenues to connect with people. I mean, that's one whole new way of doing things, and to connect with people you wouldn't normally connect with.
Terry, there's someone in Silicon Valley right now thinking, now that sounds like a startup idea.
You would think so. I started following a couple of researchers who were doing some work, and I contacted them all and kept pinging them on LinkedIn. And finally, we had a couple of conversations, and it was really hard for the researcher to see that application outside of what he was working on. So I'm still looking. So if there's anybody who wants to work with me on that, creating our avatar, I'm in.
Well, I'll tell you what, Terry, because I think maybe we've come full circle in our conversation. I'm going to introduce you to one of my coachees who is in Silicon Valley and is currently doing some research into exactly that, a potential VR opportunity and what the world could look like. So I'm going to make that connection with you and them.
I would.
I have no idea where it will go. I just want 10%.
Okay. Deal.
Terry, listen, I think that we're doing a shortened version today, a kind of an introduction to the idea. What I'd love to do is get you back and to maybe peel away a few more layers to your ideas behind your word real, which one, I love the idea of the word itself, because it just means you're showing up real, and there's something very truthful about that, but also to unpack it in a bit more detail with some examples, because I know that leaders who are listening to this would find some value in that. So maybe once we get through the elections and you finally got a new president, maybe we could get you back in.
Okay. Well, I like that future scenario. That would be excellent.
Teri Reuter, a leadership and communication coach. Well, I should say exceptional communication, because I love the idea of your equal. That word is just spot on. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll have you back very, very soon.
Thanks for having me. This has been a pleasure.